Rome, 101 BC. The Cestius Bridge crosses the Tiber River. A man is on his knees upon the frigid stone, unclothed, shaking. He has just killed his mother. The executioners have brought forward a leather bag, but it is not vacant. Within it, moving against one another, are a dog, a rooster, a monkey, and a viper, all living. They strike the condemned man with crimson rods until his back becomes a painting of ripped flesh. Then they push him into the bag with the creatures. They stitch it closed while he cries out. The dog rips at his skin. The monkey scratches at his eyes. The snake bites repeatedly, pushing poison into his shaking body. And while he suffocates in pain, they throw the bag into the river. Cicero himself described the reasoning behind this punishment. Let him be refused sky, sun, water, and earth. Let he who murdered the one who gave him life be stripped of all those things from which life itself comes. Each creature was selected for its meaning. The dog stood for shamelessness, the rooster arrogance, the monkey wickedness, and the viper the poisonous hatred he held toward his own blood. His body would never be put to rest. His soul would never find peace. This was called penuli, the punishment of the bag, and this is not made up. It appears in the 12 Tables, Rome's oldest legal writing dating back to 450 BC. But the bag was only the start. Rome created 12 methods of torture built to destroy the body, the spirit, and sometimes even the memory of its victims. Not the gladiators, not the beasts of the Colosseum. You already know those tales. Today you will see what Rome did outside the arena. The punishments saved for traitors, deserters, parasites, and impure vestals. What your history teacher never talked about. What Hollywood would never dare display. I am crown and dagger. And here there is no holding back, only the truth Rome wanted you to forget. If you want history without filters, hit like and subscribe now, because what comes next makes the Colosseum look like a children's performance. And this brings up a question: why did Rome create such detailed punishments? Because simple death was never sufficient. Every torture was built to send a particular message. The crime decided the punishment, and the punishment had to be impossible to forget. The philosopher Seneca grasped this after watching executions firsthand. He wrote, "I come home more greedy, more cruel, more inhuman, because I have been among humans." This was not justice. This was propaganda written in human flesh. Let us start with how Rome executed those who betrayed her. From the top of a cliff in the very center of the city, where the screams of the falling could be heard by senators and citizens together, the Tarpeian Rock stood on the southern peak of the Capitoline Hill, rising roughly 80 feet above the rocks beneath. It looked over the Roman Forum, the beating heart of civic life, where senators argued and citizens assembled. For Romans, there was no more meaningful place to die. The rock was named after Tarpeia, a young woman who supposedly betrayed Rome to the Sabines during the city's earliest times. She agreed to open the gates in return for what the soldiers wore on their arms, meaning their golden bracelets. Instead, they crushed her beneath their shields, teaching Rome its first lesson about the cost of treachery. From that moment onward, the Tarpeian Rock became the chosen execution site for traitors. The procedure was brutally straightforward. The condemned would be brought to the cliff's edge while crowds gathered beneath to watch. Then, without ritual, they were thrown from the height. Their bodies broke on the rocks in full sight of the Forum, a powerful reminder to every Roman citizen of what waited for those who betrayed the state. The historian Livy records that in 384 BC, Marcus Manlius Capitolinus, once a hero who had saved Rome from a GIC invasion, was hurled from the rock after being accused of wanting kingship. His crime was not merely ambition, but betraying the republican values Rome held holy. The meaning was intentional and crushing. Traitors were literally thrown out from the center of Roman society. Their broken bodies left where citizens could witness them, refused proper burial, and thus refused peace in the afterlife. Archaeological proof suggests that the area beneath the cliff gathered so many human remains over the centuries that it needed regular clearing. Emperor Claudius reportedly attended these executions himself, taking what Seneca described as twisted pleasure in examining how the bodies had landed. But the Tarpeian Rock was saved for Roman citizens who betrayed their own. For slaves, foreigners, and the lowest criminals, Rome had created something far more drawn out and agonizing. Crucifixion was so brutal that Roman citizens were legally protected from it. This punishment was saved for those Rome considered beneath human worth: slaves, pirates, rebels, and enemies of the state. The condemned would first be stripped bare and whipped with lashes embedded with bone and metal until their backs were unrecognizable. Then they were forced to carry the crossbeam called the pibulum through the streets to the execution place, falling under its weight while crowds mocked and spat upon them. At the place, executioners would hammer iron nails through the wrists and feet, or sometimes tie the victim with ropes designed to extend suffering. The cross was then lifted and the condemned was left to die. Death came slowly, usually from exhaustion and inability to breathe as the victim fought to push upward to breathe. The process could take hours, sometimes days. Roman executioners developed special techniques to extend the agony, including a small seat called a saddle that prevented victims from suffocating too quickly. Seneca, who witnessed many crucifixions, wrote, "I see crosses there, not just of one kind, but made in many different ways. Some have their victims with head down to the ground. Some pierce their private parts, others stretch out their arms." The most infamous mass crucifixion happened in 71 BC after Spartacus's slave rebellion was destroyed. The general Marcus Licinius Crassus ordered roughly 6,000 captured rebels crucified along the Ion Way, the main road from Rome to Capua. For 200 kilometers, travelers passed thousands of dying men, their agony intentionally extended by skilled executioners. Plutarch recorded that the bodies stayed on their crosses until they rotted away, a warning that continued long after the screaming had stopped. The message was clear. This is what becomes of those who raise arms against Rome. While crucifixion punished outside enemies, Rome had developed something equally frightening for its own soldiers who failed in battle. And this punishment forced brothers to kill brothers. Decimation. The word itself comes from the Latin decime, meaning to take a tenth. When a legion showed fear, revolt, or terrible failure in battle, they faced group punishment designed to maximize psychological destruction. The process was systematic and heartless. Waited for soldiers who left their posts, lost their weapons, or showed individual fear in battle. The condemned soldier would be brought before his assembled legion, every man he had served beside forced to witness what came next. The tribune would lightly touch him with a cudel, a ceremonial gesture that served as the signal. Then every soldier fell upon him with clubs and stones. The military writer Vettius noted that this punishment created such fear that facing the enemy in battle became less frightening than the certainty of death at the hands of one's own comrades. Polybius, writing in the 2nd century BC, described the aftermath. Even those who manage to escape are not saved thereby. They are not allowed to return to their homes, and none of their family would dare receive such a man in the house. The public nature was essential. It forced soldiers to participate in the killing, making them involved. After witnessing or delivering such brutality, they would never consider desertion themselves. Stop for a moment and think about what we have covered so far. Traitors thrown from cliffs, rebels crucified by the thousands, soldiers beating their brothers to death in decimation, individual cowards clubbed by their legions in fosterarium, and we are only 4 methods in. Which of these punishments do you find most disturbing? The randomness of decimation, the drawn-out agony of crucifixion, or the meaningful horror of the Tarpeian rock? Drop your answer in the comments because I want to know where you draw the line, and we have not even reached the arena yet. Damnio adibi bestius, condemnation to the beasts turned execution into grand entertainment. This punishment was saved for slaves, prisoners of war, and the worst criminals. Those Rome judged unworthy of a dignified death. The Colosseum's underground network, called the Hypergem, held 32 animal pens and 80 vertical shafts. Trapdoors allowed beasts and condemned prisoners to appear magically in the arena, creating theatrical entrances that increased audience excitement. These executions were often staged as mythological performances. A criminal might be dressed as Orpheus and sent into the arena with a lyre promised that his music might calm the wild beasts. For a brief moment, the animals would seem peaceful. Then a bear would be released and attack him to death, creating a twisted version of the original myth. The poet Martial witnessed such displays and praised them in verse. What was mere fable when performed on stage becomes reality in our arena. During Emperor Trajan's celebration of his Dian victories in 107 AD, games lasted 123 days. 11,000 animals were killed alongside thousands of condemned criminals and prisoners of war. Lions were starved for days before being released, driving them into a frenzy. Bears were irritated with hot irons until they became mindless with rage. The uncertainty of whether the beast would strike fast or play with its prey kept the stands roaring for more. The crowd cheered as men were ripped apart. Vendors sold wine and snacks, while children watched from their parents' shoulders. People placed bets on how long each victim would scream before dying. This was lunch entertainment. Equally theatrical but perhaps more frightening was vivicurium, burning alive. This punishment carried religious importance as Romans believed fire cleansed the pollution of certain crimes. Emperor Nero raised burning executions to performance art during his attack on Christians following the Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD. His executioners would coat victims in wax or pitch to make them burn more slowly and brightly, extending their suffering while providing better light. Tacitus describes the scene in his annals. Mockery of every sort was added to their deaths, covered with the skins of beasts. They were torn by dogs and died, or were nailed to crosses, or were doomed to the flames and burnt to serve as nightly light when daylight had expired. These human torches, as they came to be known, lit Nero's gardens while he drove his chariot among them, at the same time playing the role of executioner, audience, and performer. The place of these burnings, Nero's gardens on Vatican Hill, strangely later became the location of St. Peter's Basilica, changing a place of Christian suffering into Christianity's most holy site. For crimes requiring grand destruction of the body, Rome used pulveratio, death by crushing. Elephants trained to kill with agonizing care became instruments of exotic punishment. Pliny the Elder described their abilities. They can be taught to walk ropes, to throw missiles, and even to kill on command, crushing a man limb by limb as directed by their handler. This controlled destruction allowed executions to be drawn out for maximum entertainment value. The condemned would be forced to fight the beasts with minimal weapons before eventually being crushed beneath feet that could apply thousands of pounds of pressure. During the Punic Wars, captured Carthaginian generals faced death beneath the very war elephants they had once commanded against Rome. Some prisoners were dressed in enemy armor, allowing the elephants, trained to attack specific colors in battle, to perform miniature recreations of Roman military victories. The writer Aelian recorded one execution that went terribly wrong. An elephant refused to kill a condemned man who had once been its keeper, making loud sounds in protest instead. The crowd, moved by this display of animal loyalty, demanded the man's pardon. Emperor Claudius reluctantly granted it, showing how even execution as entertainment could sometimes produce unexpected mercy. But for those Rome truly wanted to erase, physical death was not enough. They needed to destroy something more basic, memory itself. Damnatio memorialia. Condemnation of memory struck at what Romans feared more than death: being forgotten. When the Senate ordered this punishment, it commanded the organized removal of the condemned from history. No earth for burial, no air to breathe, no water to drink. Symbolically removed from the sun's light upon being sealed in the bag. Cicero, arguing a famous parasite case, explained the philosophy. They want him unable to have sky, sun, water, or earth, so that he who killed the one who gave him life should be stripped of all those things from which all living things got their life. The punishment created a twisted new family for the condemned in death, trapped for eternity with beasts rather than the honored ancestors he had betrayed. While penuli came from Roman tradition, scaphism represented a torture the Romans took from the Persians and changed to their purposes. It was saved for crimes considered to place the entire community at risk: disrespect against religious sites or betrayal of military secrets. The condemned would be stripped bare and fastened between two boats or hollowed logs with head, hands, and feet sticking out. They would be force-fed milk and honey until developing severe diarrhea. Then, their exposed skin would be covered with honey to attract insects. Left floating on a still pond, unable to move, covered in their own waste, the condemned would be slowly eaten by insects while still alive. Death could take weeks. The Roman historian Plutarch described the execution of a soldier named Mithridates by this method, noting he survived an amazing 17 days before death finally claimed him. The mere threat of scaphism was often sufficient. When Emperor Aurelian captured Queen Zenobia of Palmyra after her rebellion in 270 AD, he threatened her with this fate. The normally bold queen immediately gave in to Roman authority, choosing comfortable exile over such horror. Fire has always held double meaning as both cleanser and destroyer. Romans used this duality in mors per in lentum, death by slow fire. Unlike simple burning at the stake, which could be quickly merciful, this punishment intentionally extended suffering through careful temperature control. The condemned might be placed in a bronze bull, hung over low flames, gradually cooked on a metal grid, or partially put in boiling oil. In the Roman colony of Lugdunum, modern Lyon, in 157 AD, the Christian martyr Blandina was roasted on an iron chair over carefully controlled flames as part of public games. Witnesses recorded that she stayed conscious and speaking throughout much of the ordeal. The jurist Ulpian classified death by fire as samlesia, the ultimate punishment, and suggested it particularly for arsonists, poisoners, and practitioners of magic. Perhaps most mentally frightening was the punishment saved for Vestal virgins who broke their vows: live burial. The procedure was detailed and deeply meaningful. The condemned priestess would be dressed in funeral clothing and carried in a covered litter to the Campus Sceleratus, the field of wrongdoing near the Colline Gate. There she would be placed in a small underground chamber provided with minimal food, water, a lamp, and a bed. The provision served an important legal fiction. Technically, Rome was not executing the Vestal, but creating conditions where she would die naturally, thereby avoiding divine pollution from directly harming a blessed priestess. Once sealed in this chamber, the Vestal was left to choose between ending her own life quickly or suffering slow death by starvation in complete darkness. The most famous victim was the chief vestal Cornelia, condemned by Emperor Domitian in 91 AD, despite her claims of innocence. As she was led to her living tomb, Ply the Younger record she maintained perfect dignity, even when her dress caught on the ladder leading down to the chamber. When the executioner offered his hand, she pulled back as if from pollution, keeping her purity even in her final moments. She continued calling upon the gods, saying nothing more often than, "Caesar thinks I am unchaste, I, who have performed holy rites while he triumphed and ruled." Archaeological digging near the Colline Gate have found small chambers matching historical descriptions, some holding remains of female skeletons alongside oil lamps and rotted food vessels. We have now seen 12 methods Rome perfected to punish, frighten, and control. Traitors thrown from cliffs, rebels crucified by thousands along Roman roads, soldiers beating their brothers to death in decimation, individual cowards clubbed by their legions in fosterarium, criminals ripped apart by beasts for entertainment, heretics burned as human torches, enemies crushed beneath elephant feet, memories removed from history itself, parasites stitched into bags with poisonous animals, spies eaten alive by insects over weeks, victims cooked slowly over controlled flames, and holy priestesses buried alive in darkness. Seneca the Younger once noticed, "He who has made the causing of punishment, his trade tries to find pleasure not in having punished, but in punishing." Perhaps in this thought lies Rome's darkest truth, that these detailed penalties serve purposes beyond justice. Today, the Colosseum stands as a monument to human building. Tourists photograph its arches and wonder at its size. They buy souvenirs and pose for pictures where 50,000 once screamed for blood, but walk through its tunnels at dusk, and you might hear echoes, iron gates opening, beasts roaring in their cages, the shuffle of condemned feet on sand already colored brown from previous displays. 50,000 voices rising as one while someone dies for their entertainment. The stone is easy to admire. Harder is remembering its purpose, learned cruelty rehearsed until it felt normal. Rome's punishments were not about blood. They were about control, shaping how citizens thought, feared, and obeyed. Every execution, every torture, every removal served one end to make power look eternal. That is the warning carved into the ruins. A civilization that celebrates violence eventually falls beneath its own applause. This is the story history books rarely tell, the real machinery of fear behind absolute power. If you believe truth should be told without holding back, subscribe to Crown and Dagger. I am Crown and Dagger, and this is what really happened. But Rome was not the only empire that perfected the art of human suffering. There is another civilization whose punishments made even Romans look merciful. Want me to tell that story? Let me know in the comments. And if you made it this far, drop a like so I know stories like this interest you.